Nancy. The Board of Education meeting will now come to order at 6:32. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mellon,
Here.
Ponce,
Here.
Rastrelli.
Here.
Becky.
Here.
Wellington here, Yaffe,
Yes, here.
vote.
Here. Okay, the first one is citizen comments. Do we have anyone present this evening who wishes to address the board? I don't see anyone over here. Is there anyone on?
No.
Okay, so then we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Does anyone have any questions, or were all your questions answered? Okay, all right. Well, Micah, we're just going right along. The next one is the District 20 report.
Gotta go through and approve consent agenda.
Okay. All right, so I have a motion to approve the consent agenda. So moved.
Second.
Mellon,
Yes.
Rastrelli,
Yes.
Becky.
Yes.
Wellington, yes, Yaffe,
Yes.
vote.
Yes.
Ponce.
Yes.
Now we'll to the report from the business office.
India. First follow-up report from last month's meeting, as far as next directions and looking at our facilities planning for the next 3 to 5 years. Part of the job was to come back with an environmental scan, and Andy's worked with Anthony to be able to come up with a summary today.
Lisa, did you want to?
Yeah,
Give me
just to set some context here, we talked about this last week, and I know a few of you were not able to be here, or not last week, last meeting. I know a few of you were not able to be here. And what the purpose of this conversation is that we are trying to move us to a place of figuring out how do we want to fund some significant investments upcoming, capital investments, facilities investments. The Finance Committee, which includes Andy, Peter, and myself, have met several times already, and we've been preparing this conversation kind of in steps. One of the first things we were asking was, do we have enough information about the big picture in order to understand how we want to invest? And from that conversation, we looked and did kind of a review of some of the strategic planning work that's been done at the state level. You may have seen my email about that. But also we did some benchmarking looking at other company or schools, districts near us. And the purpose of that was kind of say what's going on big picture that we need to be aware of. And then we also at the last meeting requested that the administration do a little bit of big picture thinking on our behalf, or maybe some research to understand what are those big picture trends that would be something we should consider, since going to referendum and or issuing bonds are a significant commitment over time. And it's important that we are purposeful in how we make these commitments. So that's why we were having the conversation. And that leads us to the discussion tonight. As Kevin said, we're going to be hearing about the scans. And then at the end of this conversation, we want to be able to say, do we feel like we have the information we need, or do we need to get more different information as we continue getting closer to a conversation about how do we actually want to finance? Set the stage. Did you add anything? Okay.
Before we get into this, can we start with what we asked last time, which is, let's see the calendar of the timing of where we have backing up from when we'd have to do this, so we know our timing of when we need to make decisions.
I think that's like
It
slide
is in the
4 or 5.
report, so it is toward the end, but it kind of pulls together all the stuff that we'll be talking about at the beginning, and that'll.
Well, it kind of helped for me to start with the end in mind and what we're backing up to, and then.
Are you guys okay with it?
Sure,
We can do
go
that.
on up.
Don't mind. Keep going. There we go. There's our timeline. I've got it, as you can see, I hope you can see it. It's large enough. You got the years going across the top all the way out to 25, 26. And then the different activities or things that happen in those fiscal years. Then on the far left, you've got different categories of planning and pieces that affect planning for a referendum and capital drives. Of course, the first one is facilities planning, and it gives you, again, this is just an estimate of what we might end up doing during a 5-year plan. But we start this year with just defining what the project scope might be. It's just identifying the types of things we want to have possibly going forward in a facilities type of a plan. It could be anything, everyone talks about, field house, cafeteria, auditorium, but some of the things we'll be talking about in this report may give you some new ideas of things you hadn't thought of before when we look at some of those trends that we were looking for. So those are the types of things we'll do this fiscal year. The second fiscal year, next year, we'll start getting into really refining what the scope of the project is. And maybe there's some things we want to do, maybe there's some things we don't want to do. We do want to do, but not on a Cadillac level, I guess you could say. And decide what types of facilities we want. Architectural plans will start forming and getting proposals at that point. By 23-24, we'd be looking at actually having firm plans in place with bid packages getting ready for that year that we would actually bid out in that fiscal year for looking at a start of doing some projects starting in that summer of 2024. And then, of course, those projects would be ongoing over the next 2 years and 3 summers, because your summers are your huge construction seasons in schools when you're trying to get as much as you can done. And hopefully we'd be finished by end of summer 2026 with whatever projects. But again, this is all just an estimate, a plan at this time. That's kind of that part of it, the actual facilities planning. The other pieces are debt service and tax rate, which have a huge implication as far as to what can actually be done. Obviously, it's money. How much money do you have to do the things that you want to do? This first line here is debt service. And what that is essentially the school district's mortgage. So these 2 years here that you have this year and the next year, basically our mortgage is $3.4 million. That's what we're paying out in debt service on the debt that we have. And that's been pretty level for a number of years. Most of that debt is a new addition. We've got 3 bonds for that, and that I should say all of that's the new addition, paying that off. It drops a little bit in 23-24. At that point, and talking with our consultant that does bond work, we could actually start issuing some debt then. Now, I'll say once all that debt's actually paid off, and we get the full value of what we can borrow, that would be $50 million that we could generate. So that mortgage payment, let's say it continues to be 3.4 million, will generate 50 million in proceeds for us to use for whatever projects we want to. That is non-referendum. So what it essentially is a credit limit for the school district. That's what DSEB stands for, is debt service extension base. That's ISB's word for your credit limit that you can do without going to referendum. So we could generate approximately 50 million without even having to go to the taxpayers to ask for more money. Now, what can 50 million buy? Sounds like a lot of money, doesn't it? It really isn't. In terms of what schools do, I'll give you an example. When we did this process about 4 or 5 years ago, where we looked at what would we want to do, dream, really make the high school the premier facility that we'd want it to be, Cadillac all the way. That price tag was about 150 million. That include, Laura remembers that, both Lauras. That would include a beautiful brand new field house, a brand new auditorium, brand new cafeteria, all new parking lots, all the drainage done underneath the parking lots, all new sidewalks, some new roadways that would attach so that the whole campus would be connected. And obviously some renovations to classrooms. It would be even a library, I think, got involved in that as well. So a brand new commons area. I mean, it was very nice, but that's essentially almost like building a new high school. So to give you an idea, 50 million is just like a down payment on some really nice stuff. We'll get into more of that here in a second. But once, we significantly pay down debt, all of it, we'll only have $1 million in payments left in 24-25. And that last payment will be done December 1st, 2024. All our debt will be paid off. Now, what we'd want to probably do is, like I said, you'd issue those bonds so that the taxpayer never sees the difference in their tax bill. They'll always have the same level amount, essentially that 3.4 million, their portion of it that pays that debt service will stay the same. If you issue more debt, get that $50 million in proceeds, they won't see much difference at all in their tax bill. You guys go ahead and do that. They'll stay level. It's just kind of like refinancing your mortgage and just keeping it at the same rate of payment to make it in simple terms. We'll get into referendum here in a piece in a minute. This is what it equates to in tax rate when it's all paid off. It'll probably be about 20 cents per $100 of EAV. Now, what that means is the tax rate for District 120 is about $2.50 of $100 per EAV. Of that, 20 cents is this debt, that 3.4 million of your tax bill. What that in what you guys see on your tax bill, you have a $300,000 house, it's about $200 a year. You have a $400,000 market value house, it's about $270 a year. That's what that 20 cents will equate to for most of our taxpayers going forward. It'll be a little different, depends on what EAV is at that point, but that's generally just a good thumbnail to use in terms of what that represents on your tax bill. Now down here, referendum, that was what we talked about, referendum dates. These are the next three possible ones that we could use. Obviously, I don't think March 15th will be prepared to do any kind of referendum, and it wouldn't make any sense to do it this March. November 8th, 2022 is a possibility, but typically consultants with referendums say don't do a major election. That will be, while it's not a presidential election, it will be a gubernatorial election. We'll be voting for governor of the state of Illinois. There'll be a number, I'm sure, of other statewide offices, probably some national offices, whether US reps, senators, that sort of thing. They typically say don't do that because you get a much higher turnout of voters and possible no voters. The most logical one to me would be this April 4th, 2023. And that's really just local elections. You guys know them, school board elections, could be a mayoral election, other local officials that could be in there, village board people, and of course, referendums for schools. Those are typically done that time of year. Much lower turnout rate for those who are, we're trying to pass a referendum. If that's what you guys decide we want to do, it's, you get out all of your people that support you, and you're going to, those people that you can get out to vote, their vote will count more, I guess is probably the easiest way to put it, because there'll be fewer people voting and a greater percentage of the ones you can get out that support you help your cause. So that, I would guess, would be the most logical one. It would also work in with the timeline in terms of when we want to sell debt in that next fiscal year, 23-24. And that makes the most sense at this point. So if you guys decide you want to do a referendum, I'm guessing that would be the most logical date to get one on the ballot.
This is helpful to start here. What I was anticipating though, which is, it doesn't matter now because we're pushing for the farther one, but if it would have been the earlier one,
Yeah.
What I was looking for was what would be the board meetings ahead where we would have to be making decisions and all this, and then when would we be to review stuff? Given we're probably leaning towards the latter, we have some time. I don't need to see that timeline.
Yeah,
This is
those-
helpful to start with. So thank
Yeah,
you.
those, if we tried one of those earlier ones, man, you guys chose to March, we'd have a ton of work to do in the next few months to get prepared for that.
Well, and has anyone here had experience with referendums? Okay. So they are a very large, I've had some experience as well. They are a large commitment of time. Generally, the district has some help with that because it's really a full-time job in and of itself to coordinate everything that you need to coordinate.
And typically, if you get a consultant in to help
Yeah.
out with that.
Andy, can you give us some, as an example, how much was the total amount for the addition on these bonds, and when was that, and how long did it take to get the paid off?
We did a real short only 9 years for those, and it generated, I want to say it was about 23 million in proceeds for those. We also had used some of that debt service extension based on some other debt that had been older debt that had been used to buy the golf course. So it wasn't all just that debt service or that credit limit that we had wasn't just for the new addition. Some of that money had been used to make payments on the golf course as well. So it was kind of a mix of things that 3.4 million represents there.
So Andy's made this point. I just want to emphasize that the opportunity we have here is not a common one. The moment of when debt is rolling, we're paying off debt. So, and then we can do new debt so that it stays even for the taxpayer. That's a rare opportunity. And that's why we're getting it in front of us as a board to start thinking about how do we want to use that opportunity so that we don't later have to go back to taxpayers and say, your taxes were at the level, they dropped down, and now we want to raise them up. Again, that's what we're trying to avoid.
That's what Lisa's saying there is like in this, it would start really this year when people might notice if we didn't issue debt for that 24-25 year, well, your taxpayers would say, hey, I got a drop of 15 cents. It might be, $150 off my tax bill. And then you say, okay, well, we're issuing some more debt. And then that brings up a lot of questions and people wonder, well, how come my tax bill went up? Why did it go down this year? That's what we're talking about here as far as that opportunity. We want to get ahead of that and fill that in so it stays level.
And would you clarify if the taxes you're referencing that, how many cents, will they actually see that full amount realized as a decrease on their tax bill?
Well, that's a great question because a lot of times your the bigger portion, is 20 cents of that $2.50. There's $2.30 that can go up as well. That would be your education fund and your operation and maintenance fund levy. All those different levies can go up based on CPI and how much EAV is going up. It'll be interesting to see what it does this year. This will be an interesting year because housing prices went up so much. Plus, we're getting new property. We're getting that Medline property will be coming on. Some of those properties behind Target will be coming on. So those are all factors that can make your tax bill go up. And you may not even notice that went down, depending on what other things go on. So is that where you're getting
Yes,
at,
sir.
Kevin? Yeah.
Can you just, so that we're covering all the bases, can you explain EAV as a concept?
Yeah, EAV is an equalized assessed valuation. And what that means, it's not the market value of your home. So your market, when I said you had a $300,000 home or a $400,000 home, that is market value. But the EAV of a $300,000 home is 1/3 of that. And that's what they tax you on. How they came up with that, I'm not sure. But that's just the way the system works. So they really tax you on $133,000 of a $300,000 home. So that's what the EAV is. And we look at the whole district of it. That's everybody and all the residents within our boundaries, whether that's Medline, which is our by far largest taxpayer, down to someone that's got like a 1-bedroom condo over here in town. So those are all get thrown into that assessed valuation for our district. Is that?
And like you said, Laura, Mellon and I were both on the board when we did the pie in the sky, all the bells and whistles that you could possibly have for the district. And now that we've gone through the pandemic, we may want to look at those large gathering spaces so we have more room. I think it's wise for us to look at it through the eyes of what we've gone through and what might be essential and what other districts have done to see, because that I would like to say it would never happen again, but that might be something that we need to consider.
Well, that's a great segue into the beginning of the presentation. So I've asked Dr. Cole, we can go back up to the top, unless you guys have other questions about calendar and timeline. As Lisa had mentioned, we did an environmental scan. We have Anthony Kroll put together a group of administrators. I think it was almost all the administrators in the high school. we all got together and we looked at some of those categories, first emerging trends. And I think that's part of what, some of that had to do with COVID types of pieces. And then from that, we looked at opportunities from those trends and then down to what that might mean facilities wise. So I've asked Dr. Kroll to come up because a lot of this stuff is more in his line of expertise. I can generally describe, but I think he does a better job.
So the first three here are all trends that we see in our communities or in literature right now. They're not necessarily things that we're engaged in. Some parts we are, some parts we aren't. So just so kind of that background. Dual credit is a piece that has been up and coming. I'm suggesting you approve 5 more dual credit classes tonight into our course guide. Where our students have opportunities to earn college credit while they're still in high school. Those are things that, again, with the university center, as well as part of CLC, you might have courses that are remotes, as we've all had remote classes, and we kind of got used to that in the past year, but that's now something that's even more common. And so having the infrastructure for that is a trend as well. CTE courses are huge in terms of how do we have an introductory course that leads up to a tech campus course. We do it in some areas, we don't do it in all, but we do realize that we are missing some gaps with some of our students and some of the programming that we lead up to in tech campus. And internships and apprenticeships, or even apprenticeships you can do when you're 18 or older. So working with a master plumber as an example, you can't always do that while you're in high school, but if you have a pre-apprenticeship, which those exist, you have the programming for that, those are opportunities for our kids prior to this. Internships as well, everything from what we're currently doing with McLean Fogg to the conversations I'm having with a tech company right now, what they offer some computer science internships in the summer for high school students. And I'm like, all right, we got to talk more. I wanted to hear more about how that can work out for us. All those are kind of dovetailed into what we're already doing. But a bigger piece of this is competency-based education, which is a concept that is being entertained by the state, where you can alternatively find credit than in other places other than sitting for the 60 seat hours of a class. So for example, Round Lake High School is doing some of this work. If you're in the fall play, you can earn a half credit in theater instead of taking the theater classes. In another sense, the competency-based education is you having these real life experience that leads to credit. If you take that concept and we take the work of some other the 10 schools that are piloting this for the last few years, there's opportunities there for expansion and what that leads to in our educational experiences. And that all continues to fulfill that authentic learning experiences that I strive for, whether it's the band playing at Nellie's in a club experience for the, which is a great experience for a student rather than just playing in their gym, all the way to having a work experience where you're with McLean Fogg on the floor. Those are all things that help students vision what they could do. It might not be what they end up doing, but it might be this, the next step. So those are all different trends that we've seen and we've talked about in different ways or investigated in our local communities, are things that are going on right now. And like dual credit, the other piece I want to say about that is we get about 30 early graduation requests every year. I want to graduate in December, and nearly 95% of them are all saying, I want to take this semester off, earn money, and then go to CLC. Well, if there's more that we can do where our teachers are teaching dual credit classes at Mundelein, then those students don't have to leave a semester early and they don't have to save money because they'll be getting more of it done before they have to actually pay for it at CLC. So that's some of the benefits that we're investigating with dual credit. Which all leads to technology, facilitating education, just getting the infrastructure for telecommunications as best possible. So everybody's a part of that communication, that course, even if they're miles and miles away from each other. the same time. I'll let you go with the artificial intelligence.
Like, I hope you're getting the sense of, there's a lot of non-traditional types of ways that we're trying to come at it, and those are some of the emerging trends. Is interesting, you know, this remote learning as a model of delivery of education. That is one of those COVID pieces. You know, Kevin had mentioned there, he was surprised at how many students, it's not obviously the majority, but there's a large number of students that actually prefer to do remote learning for a number of reasons, whether it's the social aspects of school, and, or they just work better by themselves in that type of environment. But there are, well, the trends may be non-traditional. One thing that kept coming up as we talked about things was, we've been doing education essentially the same way for, you know, 100 years plus. And we all know that the wheels of education do tend to grind slowly, but we are a smaller school, and I think we can move faster than others. And some of these emerging trends that you're seeing are pretty non-traditional ways of doing things. And I think COVID and remote learning just sped up that process, I would think, a little bit. Artificial intelligence, this was actually one that Kevin came up with. I didn't even know what it was, but I mean, you guys see it, you see those commercials with the kids wearing those I don't know even what those things are, those headset, I think. You can experience things in a whole different way when you're using those. And those could be, that's just an example of something that might be able to be used in an educational type of a setting in the future. So those are types of pieces we might look at as well. Another growing area, and I'm not sure how this actually would affect facilities per se, but social emotional, that whole realm has been an interesting trend that's been happening over a number of years, where, and we've talked about it variously at different times here in school board meetings as well. You know, students experience increased anxiety for many different reasons. You know, there's very, you know, a lot of expectations put on students, whether it's pressure to get into the best school possible, social pressures, all of those things are heightened and just made even worse by social media in terms of what those anxieties and expectations are. We've seen in our society just really over the last few years, a lot of polarization politically, polarization, you know, in types of choices that people make and lifestyles, and intolerance that goes along with that. And that all feeds into increased anxiety. I'm not any expert on that, probably Peter can tell you a lot more about that end of things, but that is a big trend that's been going on for a number of years, where there's a lot more of these sorts of things that we see in our students. One in the special ed arena, what we've been doing quite a bit over the last few years is bringing more students in-house so they can experience school here rather than be in a different facility. The big one, and you guys heard about it, the last meeting, was the transition. That's the biggest piece of it, but we've also done Strive. And we see that as possibly being a trend that we would have more and more of our kids in-house with us. And that's one of our dream things. I know with Jamie was to have our own school here on campus, but that could be a facility type of a piece. Another one that's real interesting, obviously, is alternative energy sources. The biggest one I think is most viable at this point is probably solar energy for our campus. When we did the new addition, we looked at geothermal, but you have to have a pretty big footprint area to be able to do that. And we just don't have the land space for that. So that was another thing that came up as well. Next slide. And of course, if you guys want to jump in and ask any questions, please do. So going off of trends to opportunities, obviously using technology to provide different and non-traditional education. We've already hit that one pretty hard. One thing that was brought up earlier, I think Laura brought it up, was provide larger and more flexible learning spaces. If you guys have been in the new edition, you can see some of how we built some of that into the new edition. And it's really cool. I mean, there's some really excellent spaces there that we're using really well, and that have flexibility where you can either open them up into big areas or break them off into small groups and that sort of thing. So we want to see more of that type of thing going on. Maybe repurposing some of our larger spaces to use for learning spaces, and what that looks like, I'm not quite sure. at this point, but that's an opportunity. Of course, what I just mentioned, solar power installation of that. Anthony brought up pre-apprenticeships, and that could be in any number of areas, probably most likely in trades, but that's an area where I think somebody brought it up, and it's called the European model. They do more of that sort of thing in Europe. Remote learning also may possibly open up more spaces to use within the high school. There are fewer kids in the building. That could open up space that we could use in different ways. Next slide, please. So implications for facilities, of course, converting current space to new classrooms and or meeting spaces, creating more flexible spaces for many uses, and possibly using that property, the annex property to the west of the main campus for something different. I mean, it's obviously being used mostly for office, but it's really, there's a lot of space that's underutilized. Could possibly be that you guys decide at some point, and that could be part of this whole plan, is just to raise that building and build something different or renovate it, whatever it may be. There's 4 acres there, and a lot of that area is not used, what I'd say, most effectively and efficiently. So that's certainly an opportunity and implication for facilities. Next slide, please. This is the slide that Lisa had shared with you last month. These are some of the decisions in terms of funding that we would have to be made in this next year or so. If you decide as a board that you don't want to make any capital improvements or maintenance, maybe only for the next 5 years, that would be, if you decide, well, we're just going to let that, we're going to pay off that debt, maybe issue a little bit, maybe not much at all, maybe do a few maintenance projects, but we're not going to do anything big. Save the taxpayers some money, we're good to go. The next one would be a possibility of issuing debt without requiring a referendum. That's that debt I was telling you about that you already have, that you can spend. That gets you 50 million in proceeds. You don't have to do anything other than just decide to issue those bonds and do some projects. But of course, that's 3 million in annual payments that we have to make, and it generates 50 million in proceeds to do projects. This piece here, we also talked about that in terms of keeping that level of taxes the same. That's kind of a tricky thing. It depends on how you structure the debt and what you predict EAV to be. Anytime you get a drop in values of homes, that creates a huge problem with that tax rate, which we saw about 10 years ago, and that screwed up a lot of people's debt service because it went sky high because the values went down, but they still had to generate enough money to pay the debt. So the idea there, though, is to keep whatever you decide to do, keeping that tax rate pretty level. It wouldn't probably generate much more than that 50 million that we talked about before. And of course, the last piece is a referendum. Now, to give you guys an idea, we are talking about the 50 million you could generate up here. If for every 50 million, you think about it in those terms I told you before, every 50 million is $200 to $270 of extra taxes that you would be asking taxpayers to pay for. But again, we talked about this the other day when we were preparing for the meeting. A lot of times the way referendums look at it is, well, what's your monthly payment? I imagine most of you have escrows. You pay in every month to that escrow from your mortgage. If you look at it on a monthly payment, it's about 17 to 23 bucks a month. That's what every $50 million would cost you in a monthly payment. So if you want another 50 million, decided you want to issue that debt that you already have and the taxpayers are already paying for, that's fine. That won't increase people's tax bills. But say you want to add another 50 million in the referendum, now you are increasing that tax bill beyond what it is already paying. And so that could be another 200 to 270 a year for every 50 million. And you can do the math on anything less than that if you want to. But that's not a decision you have to make now. As you go, why don't we go to the next slide here? We'll go back to that timeline. we're right now, we're in this area here where we're looking at the initial project scope. I'm guessing though, you will have to make that decision. Obviously, you're gonna have to make that decision in this year so that you can do that referendum. You need to know what it is. If you want to do a referendum, you're gonna have to decide the scope and what that's probably gonna cost to do that work, and then bring that to the taxpayers, and the board has to make their case.
Can you repeat that dollar amount from 50 million per month again?
For every 50 million, you wanted a monthly amount?
Or whatever it was you just said.
17 to 20.
Yeah, $17 to $23 for a $300,000 to $400,000 home. A month, yes,
And then for every 50 million.
for every 50 million, that's what it would cost. So about $17 for a $300,000 home, about $23 a year, a month for a $400,000 home. That's market value.
Just for complete clarity, that's only starting after we go beyond doing what we can already do without the referendum.
Right, exactly. If you decide to issue those bonds and get your 50 million, it should keep pretty level for most taxpayers. They won't see any difference in their bill. But if you go to a referendum, then you're gonna see that then there's an increase to the bill, obviously. So more than what you're paying now.
On some of the projects that we were considering, are kind of long overdue, and I want to reiterate to the board, Lisa, you said it very eloquently. These are decisions we're making that will have long-term impact on our district. Our cafeteria is circa
60.
1960, okay? So we are
Same with
due
our
for some of
auditorium.
these. I would hope parents will see the value of what we're trying to achieve. And I know you all take your financial responsibility for this district very seriously, and taxes are always a difficult subject, but some of these projects, it's really important that we take on that responsibility and we look at it very carefully and make the decision. Because some of it's time. Our theater and field house and things that we've discussed, it's really important to figure out, we can do it economically in the most fiscally responsive way, but I do think it needs to get done in some fashion.
So
Can I make a cafeteria comment? About high school cafeterias in general? Andy, you had said on the social emotional thing. If you haven't spent 50 or 100 minutes or 3 hours in a high school cafeteria, take a spin in there for an hour or so. This is supposed to be the time of the day when kids can just, and they're generally so loud with the hard tables and the hard floors, and you get 300 people in there talking, the sound that echoes. If you're anyone who needs any sort of like downtime or peace, that is not the place for downtime or peace. So, I mean, I don't know if that's a way to sell it
But
to
conversely,
people, but I mean, I know it needs to be cleaned and wiped off, but it's kind of chaos.
It's also small, so when you have
Yeah.
that many students coming through,
Jammed
I
in.
know my kids had a hard time getting through the line to have enough time to actually eat their food before it was time to go. And who loves being rushed and shoveling your food in so fast that you just can't enjoy it, or you don't have time to talk, and that is their social hour. And so it's very important for this age group. You know how important. That's what they missed last year, those social connections that.
I think we also have to weigh the remote part of it too, and what's the utilization, because how many kids were in there before, and now that all of them go out to lunch, what percent's in there now? Because I know a lot of them just choose, I'm gonna go out and get something because I can decompress outside better.
Sure.
I can sit out in my car with my friend and talk and catch up in a quiet space as opposed to jamming the lunchroom. So I think we gotta look at all that too.
I will address this from an equity standpoint, and this is just my opinion. But there are some kids who have a car who can go out, but there are a lot of kids. My kids didn't always have a car. So they and it was very crowded. So there wasn't an option for them to really do something different. Or they had to go get tutoring, or they had a band lesson for 15 minutes. So there was a lot of factors at play. But I said, some kids will be able to go out, but it was crowded in there already. And some kids will not have that option. So That's just something to look at it from.
I can go back to Linda's point. What you were saying is that while our 1962 cafeteria might be loud, might be crowded, might be less than calm, that you can create an environment that offer that at the purpose of a cafeteria or a dining space that at the same time has multi-purposes to it, where they can go for lunch, they can go for socialization, they can go to get away, as opposed to saying we don't need a cafeteria? Or were you saying?
Oh, of course we need a cafeteria.
right, right.
Yes, absolutely.
But
No,
the
I
environment,
think
how
you
it's
just
designed
did it.
and
I
what
think
is
maybe you
needed.
just worded things better. Yeah, you absolutely need a cafeteria. But a
What comes
space,
along with that environment is.
what comes along with that environment can be a little chaotic. So if there's a remodel of it, you know, it would be nice if it included, you know, some acoustic
Right.
considerations to make it a little more peaceful, in addition to having
I
a
think-
line that can accommodate 2,500.
Yeah, and
or
and some of the other
2,000 or
troubles
however
with our
many kids that are there.
cafeteria is because of space, even during a non-COVID year, we have probably more lunch periods than we would desire to have. Well, some kids are having lunch in the 7th period or a 6th period as opposed to something like 3rd or 4th period, but that's also too, I think, to the number of students and the amount of space, we have, right?
Well, if I could just share, you know, I'm fortunate enough that I get to go in a lot of different schools in the area. And I would just say as a school board, we have an obligation, at least in my opinion, I know we're not making a decision tonight. Number one on that list should not even be an option that we're discussing, and we're not gonna do anything for the next 5 years. Because if you go in high school after high school in the area, most of them are either in the process of doing a renovation, just finished a renovation, or they already have one scheduled to begin this coming summer or the following summer. So I just think we have an obligation. We don't have to decide now what we're going to do, but the sooner we can commit to saying we're committed to improving that building, the sooner we can move ahead with this. And I don't see how we cannot at least say we're gonna improve that building.
I think we're all probably saying that. I think it comes down to prioritization.
Right.
Let's see the dollars, let's see what they're
I
asking
think
for,
everybody's
let's see,
in agreement.
and then
There's
let's
some
figure out the
projects that-
prioritization.
Right,
So it's a good day, set it.
that was my point. I'm saying at a minimum, we're number 2 on that list.
But I agree with you.
Number 1 shouldn't be an option anymore.
I agree, because even you go a step up into the college level and you go to their cafeteria, they have so many options, like you can get sushi, you can get this, they have like stuff,
Yeah.
like the campuses are just ridiculous for what they can get.
Right.
And the money they spend to allow them for lunch. That's a little bit of a different setting, obviously, but nonetheless, you see all these things being revamped. And of course, I think we all agree it needs to be done.
Yeah.
It's just, let's figure out prioritization based on what administration and them tell us they feel like they need and what we also hear and what we think. Let's try to figure that out.
Right.
Well, and to Linda's point, if you've ever actually gone in the cafeteria during lunchtime, you have a totally different appreciation for what the kids are dealing with. I mean, a lot of us think, oh, you know, it's a cafeteria. We all manage to get through our cafeteria in our high
So
school, but
loud. I'm just assuming MHS is just as loud.
It's-
It's like.
not that I would say everybody should come to the cafeteria this year, but it is an experience to actually see what your child is going through.
I just have to just comment, because I think we should, when we're looking at that, look at options, because I love a loud, busy, chaotic. In fact, I recharge in that environment. So there are plenty of people who need that, that
Like that.
who love it, who, yeah, feed off of it. So I think that, you know, you don't want to go like all straight. If we're really going to look at things when we're planning this, we want to look at being able to provide for all kinds of people, all kinds of students.
I
So,
think that's one of the themes you saw in there is
Right.
flexible
Right.
spaces.
Right.
And that was
Not
one of the
just
things
the-
we talked about when we initially looked at this 4 years ago. The Cadillac plan was to get rid of the current cafeteria, open that whole place up and make that a huge commons area where kids could either have larger areas where they could hang out and just hang out with their friends, or a smaller area where you could just,
Yeah.
it's more intimate. Again, those are all things that we'll have to go through as we start honing in, getting some, we'll actually get some project stuff to you this spring, I'm thinking. And then next fall, of course, we'll hone it down and get it to where we want it and what you guys think are priorities. So that's the kind of the timeline. It's gonna be pretty quick. But yeah, it's got about a year here to do stuff.
So, one thing I would like for us to have some clarity about in this conversation today is what's the pie, what's competing for funds out of the pie? So certain things like regular maintenance is coming out of our operations and maintenance fund, that's coming out of money that we get for taxpayers, that's specifically pegged for that. So certain types of maintenance would happen within that. What we're talking about here are capital investments, and that does include facilities, and you've mentioned facilities several times here, but it also would include investments we might want to make in solar or other
Yes.
energy things that are big dollar, one-time investments, and certain technology upgrades or investments would also be coming out of this pie, right?
Yes.
So that's one of the reasons we wanted to have us start to think about this is that pie includes facilities and technology and energy. And so we need to be coming up through this process with how we want to divvy that money up. Right, I got that
Just, yeah,
right.
some of those things, and I mentioned it briefly before, it's just simple stuff as parking lots. You know, but when we costed that out before, it's $2 million proposition to do those parking lots, to redo them right. And if you want to do them on a more eco-friendly, I've been to conferences where they actually do like paver bricks, but the water goes through it and down. It's not an impervious surface. That adds probably about 25% to that cost. So, I mean, those are all sorts of decisions, things we can look at. As simple as stuff as we're going to need to replace that turf on the football field. That's probably a couple hundred, 300 grand right there. Those are the types of things I think, you know, you're referring to that we'll probably have to put into the mix. We've done a ton of what I call unsexy maintenance stuff over the last 10, 15 years. But if we do the solar, if that's something we want to do, typically what they recommend too is you do your roofs at the same time. Because you want to put all that stuff in at the same time, so your roof, you're not beating up your roof, or you have to take the solar off 5 years later to do the new roof. Do it all at once, and it's good to go for 25 years. You know, those are all sorts of considerations you have to think about. And Kevin Quinn certainly will help us out in that arena. So that's a great point. Any other questions? All
Right,
right.
thank you guys for
Thank
putting in
you.
all this effort, because I know it's a lot of.
And again, if you guys have any other thoughts, email me and let me know. We can add it to the mix.
Well, thank you for helping us think
I'm sorry.
bigger. Yeah, thank you for helping us think bigger picture and make sure we're framing the conversation
I
in
think
a
we,
broad way.
as you guys know, I mean, we've already discussed it, but this was last month's board meeting. We did that, established those goals. This is what we're doing tonight. And then this is what we have some decisions to do in the future here this year. So, and that's kind of our next steps that you'll have as a school board.
Well, and so before we wrap though, this is a good moment. Based on the things you heard, is there anything else you want to declare or say you think is important before we close this conversation?
I'll just add that I think like the current edition, what you see on the outside kind of is what catches the eye of the community member. Obviously, we know there's a lot more going inside. We saw that with some of our graduate or 1960s graduates coming in and looking and touring at the building to see the inside too. But I look at this as another opportunity for the community where we have a draw to our high school in a representative way of our community. And, you know, we might not have the diamond on the North Shore or something along those lines, but this could be really big for our community too, just as that other edition was. And I think it has an opportunity to keep us on the map, but let everybody know what we are working toward as a board, but also the investment we're putting into our students.
Just a real quick little story that reminded me when you said that, when we first opened the new edition, you know, that was fun to see the community reaction.
Right.
And Kevin, one of his things that he really emphasized was try to get some of our senior citizens in there to see it. We got them in, we had like bus tours and people going through it. I just love listening to their comments. And I remember there was this guy, he must have been like in his mid-80s, him and his wife, and they're walking to the building. His wife goes, "Boy, I wish I was in high school, back in high school. You know, if I could add this stuff, it would be fun." So it was the pride that people had, the excitement that they had about the quality of it, the types of educational programs that was an encouragement to me, having been through 3 years of craziness, getting that building built. Is very gratifying. And I think that ties in what you're saying.
We really have an opportunity to maximize an opportunity, because if there were ever a time that it's become obvious that schools are the focal point of every community, it's right now. And people understand that right now too. So if we can come to the community with, here's what we want to do to make this place that much better, and we've got a great list and we can support everything we want to do, I think we can generate support for that.
I would agree with you. I think there's a lot of people here that would, whether they were graduates themselves and they have their children coming here, they would like to see some of those improvements done, and they would be supportive. And like you said, it's exciting. You know, parking lots are not sexy, you know, but there are other aspects of things that are really exciting. And I think the kids would be excited too.
And our turnout at events this fall has been best I've ever seen at a lot of them. So there's a lot of excitement.
Highest attendance at the fall events in the past decade.
Wow.
Well, think about it, they just haven't had anything to go to for
Yeah.
2 years. So of course, they're excited to go to the games and do stuff because they haven't had that opportunity. So it's big, but you know,
But what's great
Hopefully-
too, it's not just kids, it's the adults coming out too, which is so great to see.
Okay,
Love it.
again,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Next is the principal's office.
A little shameless plug. If you haven't been in the building in the last 2 weeks, in the front, in the curved wall, we have the 60th emblem. And then we've installed 13, 14, 15 pictures comparing 61 to 21. And there's 2 pictures to the conversation you were just having, a very to your point, you should be very interested in seeing. But it's great to see the juxtaposition, Title IX, the changes that occurred in those 60 years. And so if you get a chance, take a look. It's really, really entertaining to see. So this is the annual meeting or presentation on the course guide. Any deletions, additions, or alterations to the course guide for the 22-23 school year. Let me just start by saying there are no deletions this year from any of the courses in our course guide. All right, so just start with that one. And then we'll move on to alterations. The first one is because of the success that we've had for the last 3 years with earned honors world studies, we believe that we've been able to create and have a rigorous curriculum, as well as allowing students to do experiences that earn them credit, where kids who have typically not earned credits, honors credits, in a course like this, because of our placement system where we're testing students and saying, you're an honor student, you're a regular student. We have blown that apart, and we have seen a huge increase in our students earning honors and our students of color earning honors, where they typically would not have through our old process of placement. With the success of what we've seen and what we've been able to do with world studies, earned honors, it's time for us to expand earned honors into the rest of our core. So we are proposing tonight that we will have earned honors biology, which is a required course for all freshmen. Earned honors English 1. Math gets a little tricky because students enter in high school, some in Algebra 1, some in geometry, some well above geometry. What we do know is that all students that come to Mundelein High School for math, in the first math class they're going to take is a geometry class. So we decided that probably the best proactive way we could work with earned honors with math was to do an earned honors geometry and construction class. Either the student is going to come in as a freshman, and that would be an opportunity for them to earn honors in a geometry and construction class, or they would have taken Algebra 1 as a freshman, and as a sophomore, they can elect to take that course for earned honors. So that's how we've worked it, and that's how we're proposing it for mathematics this year. And then finally, we're dabbling with the idea of how does this work with electives? We do have a pathway, elective course pathway, Project Lead the Way, an engineering pathway. And the first course is Introduction to Engineering Design. And we believe we have a way of students earning honors in that class. And so we'd like to pilot that for a couple of years to see how that works out for us. And in that process, we'll investigate how other electives may be able to earn honors as well. We don't know if that's going to work out. That is a complete guess game for us right now. We're going to try it and see where it goes though. And we feel that this is a course that we could actually get some traction with. Yes, sir.
For the geometry and construction, did you say that there is an honors geometry?
There is an honors geometry already.
Okay. And
Typically, if you're coming in as a freshman,
that's what you mean.
you're accelerated and you're probably taking honors geometry.
So one of the things I'd want to point out for the board, the earned honors that you're seeing, this is directly in line with the school board policy that you put together by equity. And what you wanted to see us do as far as the school district with opening up avenues for our students. So this mirrors that. I just want to make sure you see that that's your work that you've done. You've allowed us to do this. And you should anticipate each year, we're going to keep looking at how we can expand our earned honors. Because we want all of our students, once they enter into high school as freshmen, to be able to have that opportunity for an earned honors course. So it's something that you'll continue to see year after year.
This is the beginning of the climb up that mountain. And Stacy and I have been working. Stacy much more has been in the trenches, making this play out well. So next slide. Let's go on to some other alterations in science and math. AP chemistry. Now, this is going to be an odd one for you, and I'm going to tell you why it's odd. I'm going to be very transparent with this. We're actually going to ask the prerequisites be kind of tightened up mathematically, because we're finding that students who don't have a high math ability in that course don't perform as well as that they take honors chemistry instead of just chemistry, because there's topics in honors chemistry that are not taught in chemistry. So when you get to AP chemistry, you're at a disadvantage because there's some things you've missed. Now you might say, why are you trying to tighten that all up? We are talking about a course of we're talking about one section a year typically, but let's go back one slide. If earned honors biology does what we believe it will do, we are going to see an increase in the number of students getting honors biology credit as a freshman, which we think will translate into more students wanting to take honors chemistry. Okay, so we do see that would be a pathway where this would still not be locking people out, that we still have a process where students can gain entrance into this course.
Anthony, would a current student that's not going to be able to meet those requirements, but met the current requirements, be allowed to take AP chemistry, almost like grandfathered into taking the course?
We always have situations where we have a conversation with the family about, we really like to do this. I'm very motivated. Can I do it? And we do allow students to do that. When we find that a student is very motivated, they perform well. So yes, those are those little conversations that we have that are outside of our processes, or actually a part of our processes, I should say, but they're not the stated process. And honors physics and AP physics, we are increasing the math level. Again, students who don't perform well in those two physics courses, it's because of their math abilities. We do find that when they take Algebra 2 trigonometry, they're going to see success in those physics classes. So that's one thing that we've seen over the last 3-4 years that we needed to tighten up. Earth science is an odd one. You're going to see that this is a course that's sophomore, junior, senior level, and we're asking you actually to take the senior level off of this course. Typically, a senior who is looking to take a 4th science class is a usually high achieving science student. And they're like, I haven't learned anything about rocks yet, anything about the earth. I haven't found any of that. And so they'll take earth science. Our earth science class is typically not geared to that level of student. And so it's not a good experience. So we just decided to take the senior year off of that. Students who typically are going into earth science are getting their second year of required science before they graduate. It may be their last science credit, it may not be, but typically it's not a class that students are taking in order to go on to an AP level course next. And then finally, computer science principles and computer science A are both AP courses that we offer. We're allowed from the State Board of Education to offer math credit for those courses, as well as an applied arts credit. So we'd like to make that official. All students will take Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 when they're in high school or before they get to high school. But these will offer other opportunities for them to get their math credit beyond those courses. All right.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Oh, you still got more. I'll wait till you're done.
All right. So the next change is in our world language areas. In Spanish and our heritage learner and our French 3 level classes, we're asking to add honors to those courses. That's what we do see in the data. If you're looking to go to school, a post-secondary university, at least 2 years of world language is preferred or is necessary. So you have students who will go through some type of world language 2, and then it drops off. The students that will go on for 4 years, which is an advantage when you go to university, they are making a commitment to do that. And so we wanted to honor that with an honors credit. It also puts us in line with our other neighboring schools that are doing that when we do that research. I'm going to ask for your ability to just hold off on speech. I'm going to come back to speech, but what you see here, I'm asking for it to be opened up for freshmen as an elective class. I'll show you why in a moment. So if you just bear with me, I'm going to come back to that one in a minute. Chorale and Bella Voce, we're adding some additional language to the description to talk about the different events that they're going to sing at that weren't in there before. Honors Advanced Media will be a dual credit class with CLC. Right now we have Honors Media, which is the course right before. We've had Honors Media, which is a dual credit class with CLC. We already had that for 2 years. This class we've not had as a dual credit, so it was not honors, it was just advanced media. So they would go from an honors class to a non-honors class, and everybody goes, yeah, why? We talked to CLC, there's been a change of heart. We've come to an agreement. Now we can offer that as a dual credit class. So that pathway of courses for media all of it will be honors and dual credit at the same time. Strength 1 and Strength 2, which is a wellness class that we've added over the years to support our athletics department, which is a fantastic, it's grown over the years as well. This is a course where our students who are student athletes are typically getting their weight workout done prior to then going into practice after school. What we'd like to do with Strength 1 and 2 is not allow students to waive that class for athletic reasons. So if I'm an athlete, then I have right now the ability to waive my PE class. We're asking that those 2 PE classes not be waived because of their benefits to supporting our athletic department. And then finally, driver's ed is one that we have been looking at for a while now. When we offer a driver's ed class during the school year, that's 4 teachers, 1 to teach the classroom part and 3 to be behind the wheel with students that get their required 6 hours within the semester. We run 2 sections of that a year within the school year, actually every semester. So we have 8 teachers, or if you will, for each period dedicated to driver's ed. We do have those, we don't push all driver's ed to summer school when most kids have a lot of time, because the way we've worked it in the past is our students would only be able to waive the fees to be in driver's ed if they took it during the school year. So we worked through all the details, and we are allowing students who are fee waivered students to continue to be fee waivered in summer school as well, which takes away that criteria, that concern. So if students want to take it over the summer and they're fee waivered, they're allowed to, they won't have to worry about the fee along the way. We believe that that's going to increase the number of students in summer school, allow us to maybe reduce one section in the school year, and then use that FTE to lower class sizes and wellness and other places.
Can you go back to the strength 1 and 2 in the athletic?
Yes.
courses and talk through that again?
So
I'm confused.
those courses are weightlifting courses that are created specifically to support the student athlete. So the coach is going to talk with the instructor. They are developing a program, a weightlifting program that's specific to their sport. So you're not going to have a tennis player bulking up, but they'll be doing reps that are contingent with just being strong, but not trying to gain all the bulk. Whereas a football player is trying to work to build that bulk. So there's different ends to the means for different athletes, depending on what their sport is. Those programs, those weightlifting programs are tailored to the students and their sport. And that's what they do. That's how the curriculum works, for strength 1, strength 2. What we're asking for is, we don't want an athlete to go into football and then say, I'm in football, I'm going to waive my strength 1 class now.
By waiving it, they don't have to,
They don't have to take
They
PE.
don't have to take it. Now we're
They
saying you have to
get
still take it.
for taking it, or would?
So when they waive it, they're opting not to take PE. They're opting not to take the weightlifting class that supports their athletic program. So we're saying we would like to not allow them to waive. So they would need to stay in strength class, continue in that program that supports their athletic team.
So when they waive it, PE class, do they still then satisfy the PE requirement?
Yes, that is allowed,
I guess what I'm getting at.
because
is
you're in an athletic team at the
This
same
would
time.
cancel that.
That's what we're asking to overwrite. Yes.
I guess I'm confused why we're doing that.
Okay,
Other than,
so
I
this-
understand what you're saying, but we're telling our athletes, you can't do that. But
So they're
they're
taking-
participating in an athletic event.
We rely on that curriculum to strengthen our students, our student athletes physically during the school day, so that when they're practicing after the school day, those practices don't have to be weightlifting classes or weightlifting practices. They can be about the skill, about the plays, about the game, the strategy. If before we had strength, coaches would probably sometimes they had two practices, one in the morning, weight lift, then come back in the afternoon, we're doing the strategies and the skills. What the class does is it offers the student to take that weightlifting part and not have an extra practice, but to do it in their PE class to benefit the athletic
But it
program.
also takes up class period.
And it also takes the class period, so they get their PE credit along the way. Now, the Illinois State Board of Education allows a student athlete to waive out of PE when they're in season. So from the first day of season to the last day of season, they can be out of PE. That would just be counterproductive to the situation that we've created with our student athletes.
I guess just as a follow-up to that, is there a non-athletic waiver where other kids are going to be able to get out of PE, but athletes cannot?
So currently, we do that with our band and our choir
I
students.
think that's what I'm getting.
Right, because that's where it seems like an inequity would be created. I'm playing basketball, I have to go to PE, but if I'm in the pep band during basketball season, I can get
I
out
don't
of
have
it.
to go to PE.
Correct, but my work in my PE class isn't directly related to my pep band activity, pep band skill.
Yeah,
My-
and I get
my-
that because I make both my kids that play sports stay in PE. I'm just trying to look at it from a broader spectrum.
If you can do it here, why can't you do it here? If
Right.
you can't do it there, why should you have to do it here? I guess that's what I'm trying, is it balanced with those two? the athletes and then the band.
Are there many kids in strength? At strength 1 and 2 using a waiver right now?
That's a great question. It's not huge. No,
Okay,
maybe
because I
maybe
imagine,
up to a third sometimes.
my guess is most athletes, if I'm a basketball player, for example, my coach would probably look down upon my showing up and saying, hey, can you sign this PE waiver for me?
Yes,
Right.
that's true, but it still happens.
Oh.
It still happens. That help? I guess if there's a.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to fill in my head, if a student wanted to take a PE waiver, opens up a class period, they can take a different class. They're in there.
That's a great question. So that is actually not what happens. So if I'm in football from August 8th until, let's be positive, Thanksgiving, that's finals, right? That's the state finals. That's still the semester, right? I'm still within semester 1. I'm not allowed to just jump into another class during my PE period and take, geometry and construction, for example, and do that in addition to whatever else I was doing. Because at some point after Thanksgiving, I gotta go back into PE. Unless I'm a wrestler and then I'm going, probably, I try to do it again, but again, it defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do with the athletes. So ultimately, you're not going to be able to waive the class and then start another class. You're waiving the class and going to study hall.
As soon as your sports is over, you're back into your.
Correct. Good. All right, let's talk about the additions. I'm gonna skip I'll do early bird first. Early bird PE, early bird strength. Okay, strength again is a class to support our athletic program. This is a contingent, we want to put it in the course guide, but it's contingent on what future decisions we're going to make as a district as we move forward. If we go to a permanent late start every day, then this offers the opportunity to have a PE class at the beginning of the day for our athletes. Now you might say, well, the whole conversation about going to a late start is that we didn't want students losing sleep and coming in, losing sleep and coming into school. First of all, right now, this happens, if this were to happen now, you're looking at students coming in at 5:30 or 6 until 7 o'clock. That's the current one. On a late start, if it's a permanent late start, they'd be coming in at 6:30 or 7, going till 8-ish, roughly. So again, that's going to shift forward if we're on a late start, as well as, excuse me, as well as we have to be concerned with, I just lost my thought. The other thing that we're batting around is the benefit of having a strength class. It's a smaller group of students, around 60 in the semester. Strength 2 is, and the cognitive abilities are enhanced by having some exercise in the morning and then going on through the day. Physiologically, it's also benefit to our athletes. If they're doing a workout in the morning, they're having the full day to recover from that physically before they go to their skills and strategies practice after school. Again, this is a small segment of our population. We also are curious at this point, if it is a permanent late start, will we have enough bus drivers? Will we need transportation for this? Unsure of that. So we have some things, if we do need transportation, do we even have transportation ability for it? So this still may, even though we are interested in it, it still may fall apart for a number of reasons. But we just want to be prepared for it.
Would students in that course then have the option to end their day after 7th period and have 8th period free?
They may. They could have their study hall that day, they could have a free period. So we do allow seniors and juniors to have a free period, which, they typically, that would lose them, lower them down to 6 periods a day. Yes. And so this would be one of them. Unless they're a band student, they're probably going to tack on one. So it's a reality that happens.
I guess back to Peter's question on the prior one that we discussed, where the waiver thing is it fair to only offer that to just athletes? What if you have somebody that's not an athlete that says, I want to do strength in the morning?
Oh, non-athletes can take that class.
Okay, because I heard you say that was only offered for athletes.
Ah,
I might have
Let
misheard.
me clarify. Strength 1 and 2 are for any students. It certainly are athletes. But we're talking about this in terms of the only people that we are trying to prevent from waiving it are athletes. We didn't want an athlete to waive strength.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, I thought I heard you say the early bird strength 2 here would only be offered for athletes. Is that what I heard you say, or did I miss?
It wouldn't, no, we would not restrict it to just the athletes. I'm sorry. It would be open to anybody who wants to come do it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's typically athletes though, but. Thank you for clarifying.
You do anything like give preferential enrollment to the athletes if, if you get to the certain point where you've got too many in a section, or no, it doesn't ever come up?
We haven't done that yet.
Okay.
What really holds our hands a lot of times is just the number of stations in the weight room. But even that hasn't really held us back too much.
Early bird PE might be good for kids who go to tech campus who have a really full schedule.
That's true too. That's true too. Yes.
I'm sorry to rewind, but I have one other thought on exemption. I'm thinking about the only objection I could think of a parent coming up with is, let's say it's a winter sport when everyone, or early spring when everyone's vying for indoor space because it's too cold to be outside. And sometimes there's those super early morning practices. Might we get a parent that would say, why can't my kid just go to study hall? He's exhausted. He was at practice at 5:30 in the morning and he has a full day. That's just maybe
Yeah.
like an outlier sort of situation that might happen.
I have not received that
You haven't had that.
conversation from a parent
I hope I
for
didn't
a
change it.
high school athlete.
Okay.
I have received it for a club athlete
Oh, okay.
all the time.
Alright.
Club athletes, yes, but we don't know that.
Okay.
Because it's not a high school sport. It's
Got it.
more concerned.
Okay.
But yeah, so that, I have received it for only that period. All right, so let's go on to the last of the additions. And earlier in June, Larry Calhoun came and he presented on the Aspire pathway, educational pathway. So what I'm asking for in this proposal is to add all the courses that would come in for this pathway. Now, 2 of these courses are for this coming year, Introduction to Teaching Methods and Foundations of Development. And then I'm asking for not to come back the next year for them. Just let's get the whole thing, the whole pathway out there and improve the diversity in schools and the exceptional child and the internship for the following year. All of these classes are going to be dual credit. They're all in conjunction and partnership with CLC. They'll be taught by an MHS teacher who has the criteria, the qualifications to do so. So that's how all due credit, that's how we want all of our dual credit to be done. We want to have our staff to be qualified to teach those classes, but offer those on a college transcript for our students.
But
You
these
go-
are all, everything they do would be on site here.
Correct. Let's go to the next slide, and so I can show you what it would look like for a full program. Remember I talked about speech? Well, the reason why is as a freshman, we'd like our freshmen to have the opportunity to take that speech elective. Public speaking is going to be a big thing for an educator. So let's get them used to speaking in front of big groups right from the start. It's not a necessity. It's just a program piece that we felt would be really helpful. As you go down to 10th grade, the foundations of development and intro to teaching methods would be the first 2 sets of classes. Then the diversity in school and exceptional child is 11th graders, the internship as a 12th grader. That's great. If you're coming in as a freshman, which the intent is that the middle school would be encouraging students, because this is not just a D120 initiative, this is a D75 and 120 initiative, that students are being encouraged, being talked to, being shown different advantages to going to this program. So we expect a lot of our students to start as a freshman. But let's be honest, some of our students the light will turn on for them as a sophomore or junior. And how do they get into this? So if we go to the next slide, I just wanted to show that we have thought about how our students can access this depending on if they come late to the party. Freshmen, as we described, it's how they come in. But if you're coming in as a sophomore, you wouldn't take speech, but you would start with that second block of the 2 Foundations of Development and Teaching Methods class. These 2 classes are the prerequisites for these classes. So if you keep going, freshman, sophomore, junior, and you're in progress, great. But if you come in as a junior, you're actually going to have to take these 2 classes before you come down here and take the internship. If you're a senior, you're not going to take the internship. You're going to have to take these 2 prerequisites first. So we've thought through where you'd access it. We've thought through the last minute choice, or the last minute decision-making process of where you could still take the internship, because that's the authentic learning experience that we want you to have. With our classrooms, with anywhere in D75 or 120. So those are the kind of things that we've asked to think through. And we think we've addressed all of those at this point. And CLC has agreed to that in their dual credit application with us. I think, next slide. Oh, that was, we won't go back. Any questions or concerns that you have with the overall proposal?
I have one in general, just, and I know it might be hard to answer the rest right now, but hopefully you kind of thought about it, is with these alterations and changes we're talking about, student population staying the same, all things somewhat equal. Does this add head count? Does it reduce head count? Does it stay the same? What are your anticipations of this? Because it'd be great if we approve, let's say we approve all this today, but then next meeting you guys come back and go, oh, all that you approved, we need 30 more teachers or whatever. That's kind of what I'm asking is, what is the implication to your staff?
So what we always do is we try to staff, we start to staff by student choice, right? So we ask students to choose courses based on their choices, and then we staff accordingly. We do need to look at that, right? We had the biggest freshman class we've had in a while, and any of our freshman classes, yeah, they're a little thick. There's a lot of kids in those sections. We're looking at another large freshman class coming up. So we have to be aware of that, but we're also hoping that we have some ideas of how we want to think through some things and see if that will ease some of the pressure. We don't have to run everything. We want to keep courses on our books, but if they don't have enough students to fill it, can we look through and say, hey, this class, there's 17, 15 students that are signed up for it. That's a lot of dedication for an FTE. Could we let's look at who's in that class. And this is a strategy we typically have. Are they juniors? Are they seniors? If they're juniors, mostly juniors, then we're not offering the class, and we'll say, hey, we want you to take the class next year. And then hopefully we'll get juniors and seniors that are willing to take the class, and it grows in numbers. So we'll hold classes like that.
Okay, and I get it's tough because it
Yeah.
depends on the mix of how the students choose to go with they go. So I get it, it's a mix, but I just was wondering if.
Ultimately, you still have 2,100 students, so it's just a matter of whether the staffing's in the right place. You'll have to look at that. Something like the Aspire educational program, you have to have a certain certification to teach that. Not just anybody can teach that. So those are things that we have to be concerned with. If we didn't have a teacher with the certification, then we can't put kids in this class. And we'll have to pause for a year until we were able to get that.
I know Larry's not here, but can you just remind us how we're promoting this to make sure we get full classes?
So we have a shared service committee, the Aspire Educational Committee. And there's subcommittees that are meeting with dual, both districts are represented on those committees. The intent, from what I recall from those other committees, because I'm not on those subcommittees, is that they're trying to identify students and promote this pathway to them while they're in middle school. And then enticing them to getting them in a situation through activities, clubs and activities in the middle school to get them interested and keep them interested, and then bring them to the high school and then have them enroll in these classes. So there's I believe conversations through extracurriculars and in the classroom. It's my background on it.
When will we kind of have a feel for how many students are taking advantage of it?
So certainly, as we go through course selection with our current students, starting in November and going through winter break, we'll have some indication there right off the bat. But fully, probably not till February,
All right. Thank you.
when we get the freshmen as well, the incoming freshmen included.
Do you have off the top of your head the number of students who get a waiver for strength 1 and 2?
No, I do not. I can find out for you.
Just idea, like ballpark.
I'm thinking if you have a football team of 60, maybe 20. That's my guess. That is completely unsubstantiated guess. So,
I was just thinking about numbers and head counts.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, superintendent.
All right, good evening, everybody. I have 2 items for my report. If you'd please pull up the delegate resolution report. So each year, the III conference that takes place in November, they ask the boards to have representation, which we will take action on tonight, to vote on behalf of the district in regards to the resolutions. You should have received the resolution packet with the board materials. So tonight's the first night we're going to go over this with at least process. And between now and the November board meeting, we'll ask that you as a board go through and be able to document if you support or oppose the resolutions that are presented before each of you. And then be able to give that feedback to the individual board member that will represent you at the resolution meeting. Take the votes. So the whole point of this is those resolutions were submitted by other school boards that they felt needed to be brought forth for the state of Illinois. The School Board Association compiles it, sends it to all of us and says, okay, tell us what you think. What ends up being approved at that III conference ends up being the priorities the School Board Association starts working towards with the legislature and they would need to do. Okay. So for you, the key part really is, first of all, in your packet, you're going to want to find board recommendations for each of you individually. And it is approximately the 4th page in. What I want to be able to point out for you, just so you're aware, is on the resolution sheet, when you see new resolutions, it starts with number 7. If you support or oppose, and you see the number 7 there? Well, when you go into the actual resolutions, new resolutions, yeah, you gotta look them up. It's number 7 in here. It's not the first one.
Me for a minute.
So what I would suggest, if you like doing things sequential, personally, however you want to do it, when I did it, just look for number 1. Number 1, pre-service teacher education licensure, literacy. That's the first one also on the resolutions for you. All right, so that's what you gotta be mindful of when you're reading through this list. Because it'll be easy to get mixed up. They don't know why they did it, they did.
I think they tended to cluster some based on topic, and if there was a better one that was likely to be approved, they kind of put that next to the other. So I didn't see that this time.
Yeah.
And so to be clear, the IASB is an advocacy group. And they're asking us as school boards what their agenda should be for advocacy.
Correct. So that's what we'd ask that you do between now and November. So highlight the ones or pieces that you think are important, and then we'll compile the information you have for the ones that you oppose and or support. And then you'll have a discussion in November saying, here's what we would like to go forward with.
seemed like there were several rejections from last year that they're just recrafted, renamed, or consolidated. The gun storage one popped out. I remember that one right away.
Yeah,
Do we have our delegate appointed already?
Well,
Oh,
that's what we're doing
that's
tonight.
Tonight.
I think we said, me, which I'm happy to do.
right, so the thing to look at when you go through the resolutions, somebody might have seen it, it also gives you what their recommendation is from the School Board Association. It's like the first one with the pre-service for teacher education, their committee recommends do adopt. So they're giving you some guidance there, at least of what their group is suggesting for you.
We asked that they're gonna like fill this out, obviously, and then is it gonna be shared with me so I can consolidate and see what our numbers are to see kind of what we're gonna do on each one? Or-
Yep. So what I was gonna ask, I didn't know how you wanted to handle it. Maybe we can get them all beforehand, and then we can say, okay, as a board, here's kind of where we,
What I'm hoping is that we get them a little bit beforehand and maybe because we have one more meeting before the
Yeah.
actual one. And then maybe at the next, at that meeting, we can just kind of put which vote was majority weighing and then just discuss if anybody has concerns about that. So that way I can go in and vote as the board, as one board collectively. So, yeah.
I remember, I think that's how we did it last year.
so the next board meeting where we discuss it is November 9th. So we'd want the week before,
Yeah.
roughly.
Yep.
So I'll put it in the Friday update a week before. Oh, we haven't officially taken action. You know, Mark will be your representative there.
And I'm happy if you want to not have to track it or make on, if they just want to send it to me, I'm
Send
happy
you?
to keep track of it. That's fine too. You guys
Okay.
can just send me your. Just
And
put the
then
number
tomorrow.
7, you vote yes or no, whatever, and I'll just mark them all down and then that's gonna happen.
Okay.
And I think that delegate meeting's on usually on Friday mornings or Friday late mornings usually of the board meeting, I believe, is that right?
Yeah, for actual voting. So I think the thing to look at is they have 2 video meetings.
Right, Anna let me know about those.
Okay.
I'm gonna attend one of the 2. I think they're the same, but I think they're covering the content of what they're gonna, so that if people have questions ahead of time, so.
Yep.
I'll listen to those, and if there's something that comes out of those, because I think one of them's November 3rd. So I'll try to get on that one. If I hear anything that kind of sparks, I'll relay it to everybody when we meet.
Okay.
When's our November meeting?
9th. It's tight, right? We'll be okay. All right, so if you have questions, feel free to call. And then the second topic I have, we've already discussed, is to make sure the board does need to take formal action on appointing your representative, and that is Mark. Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you. The next thing on the agenda is the committee and representative updates. So committee appointments, finance and facilities. We covered these earlier. Okay.
Mhm.
Representative appointments, anything from CEDAW?
No, nothing new.
Okay. Community outreach?
I think it was all of us, and I think, like he said, I've been hearing that games are being well attended, people are happy to be back in the events and the venues, so.
So most people I've ever seen at football games, and then when we beat Libertyville last Friday night, it was like an outpouring on social media from alumni coming out of the woodwork, saying how proud they were
Yeah.
to live in Mundelein, be a Mustang. Peter and I did the parade, multiple people, some of them, they said it kind of funny, but some were serious. Like, don't you dare close that school back down as we were driving by down the street. Thank you, but we also got a lot of thank yous as we were driving down the street too, for having the school open and how happy the kids are to be back. So the parade was really cool.
I would say I saw the same thing on social media, really wonderful comments about how just everything went out. And I was able to actually attend the last game Friday night, which was really nice to see the band with their brand spanking new uniforms and the football players and the happy crowds that were there. And it's just really nice to see a kind of a fun Friday night.
I would also share, because I wasn't at the last meeting of sheriffs, unfortunately. So I went to open house here in person. And where I work, both of our open houses were virtual. different world. I can't even explain. And so many people were so happy to see each other and be in person at open house here. It was just a much better experience.
I had the honor to bring along with us in the parade, the first, a member of the first graduating class from 1962. And she was tickled to be there. She was a little bit uncertain at first, but within 30 seconds of the parade, we were in the Mustang. She saw one of her former classmates throwing candy out to her. Within 5 minutes of that, she saw another classmate. Within a few minutes of that, I mean, she was more of a star than anybody. I think it's a great experience for her. She even had grandkids there holding signs that we were surprised to see later on. So that was fun. And the Mustang made it. No issues with the Mustang. No pushing this time.
Well, that reminded me, I went to the pep assembly in the stadium on Friday, and that was a really cool experience to see an outdoor pep assembly too. The kids were really into that.
Kids are all
Seemed like
into it.
They were all there. Yeah, it was a great week for the kids.
She also reported that she believes it was their first homecoming in 1962 that they played Libertyville, and she thinks they beat them also. And when she was telling us that story, we were all thinking, well, it's going to be a pretty high mountain to climb. But we did it, and it was a heck of a game. Fantastic.
And a personal note about the attendance, so my daughter, my ex was gonna be going to California for the weekend and she wanted to take the girls with her. And so she texts me and says, Eliana doesn't want to go. I said, why? She committed her friend, they were gonna go to every football game this year because it's the first time back. And I said, I looked at her, I said, girl, you're skipping California to go to a football game? And she's like, yeah, I want to. And I was like, all right, that's your choice, that's fine. And so she didn't go. She stayed behind because she wanted to go to the game.
That's okay. Did anybody get to the distinguished alumni?
I did. And that was another one of those moments. You know, you had former or current veterans that were there. You had, I think there were 2 or 3 PhDs in the audience, one commenting on, all of them really commenting on touring the school, seeing what they remembered, seeing some of the new things that are in there, commenting on, one of the gentlemen uses the same electron microscope and his instruction as we have. At a university, right. Officer Witt sharing a very touching, sentimental story about his years and challenges throughout the course of his life and where he is and what the high school has done for him as a young man who grew up here and attended the high school. They all had that same message. Makes you think about what an addition could do, but their message was simple. You know, what they thought maybe in the moment that they were getting out of the high school was different than what it was in the end. And we didn't have to have all the fancy stuff. What we had was a diversity of a population of students, and we had experiences from haves to have nots and found ways to get through it. You know, that was the same message from Ms. Selba about coming over from Libertyville and getting really tight with her classmates because of the uniqueness of that situation. And I think those alumni were sending a similar message, and that's what we saw all week from the students too. So that was a incredible hour and a half, 2 hours on a Saturday to see those stories come to life like that.
And if I could, I'd like to make one ask related to the whole capital planning stuff that we were talking about earlier, is as we start thinking about the prioritization of these things, it would be nice as we get closer to that decision time, if you would mind setting up an optional tour, if you will, where we could go, because some of us haven't seen all of these things, and it'd be nice to walk through and see, this is what we want to do, or this is what it currently looks like today, because not all of us get into the cafeteria even on a per time basis or one-time basis. So it'd be nice to kind of walk through to see that. And again, make it optional. So you guys have been there a lot, maybe you don't need to go, but
That's a great idea, because you really do have to see it, like the transition center is something you have to see to really appreciate.
Yeah.
And I think it would be helpful for those, I mean, who've really been in the school, you know, so yeah, Kevin, I'm sure you can make that happen, right?
Just wrote down, so as soon as we have some of the ideas formulated, we'd be able to walk through the different spaces and see what some of the updates were 6 years ago and say, okay, here's how we could imagine some of the other spaces that could be utilized differently.
Great. Okay. Last one is legislative. Laura?
Legislative, I didn't do my normal thing, but Lisa shared with us the state plan for their strategic plan. And if you had a chance to look at it, it just, particularly with some of the things that we're talking about tonight, it just seems that the state is supporting what we are looking at in a lot of this stuff, the earned honors being, an opportunity for improvement in equity, and the state is doing the same thing. The idea that we're looking at emerging trends and we're looking at those same things. So it's just nice to know, I don't want to say for once, but to know that the state is supporting what we're doing. And so much of the time, I feel like we're coming up against the state. So this is really nice to see that we're on the same page. So I'm just gonna leave it at that and let's go with the high.
All right, sounds good. Okay. The next thing are our action items. So we have two of them tonight. Yeah, ready? The first one is the 2022-2023 course guide. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education of Mundaline High School District 120 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the 2022-23 course guide alterations and additions as presented. I have a motion.
So moved.
Ponce,
Yes.
Yaffe,
Yes.
Vote,
Yes.
Mellon.
Yes.
Rostrelli,
Yes.
Becky,
Yes.
Wellington, yes.
The next one is the IASB delegate. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education of Mundaline High School District 120 accept the superintendent's recommendation to select Mark Ponce, board member, as the Illinois Association of School Board IASB delegate from Mundaline High School District 120 Board of Education member.
So moved.
Second.
We're also thankful you're doing
Let's
this.
hurry, take the roll.
All right, Mellon,
Yes.
Yaffe,
Yes.
Vote,
Yes.
Ponce,
Yes.
Rostrelli,
Yes.
Becky,
Yes.
Wellington, yes.
Okay, the next one is the Board of Education meeting will now adjourn and enter into executive session at 8:13.
So
Roll call,
moved,
please.
so moved.
Second.
Wellington, yes. Mellon,
Yes.
Ponce,
Yes.
Rostrelli,
Yes.
Becky.
Yes.
Yaffe,
Yes.
Vote,
Yes. Okay, can I have a motion to return to open session?
so moved.
Second.
Wellington, yes. Ponce,
Yes.
Rostrelli,
Yes.
Becky.
Yeah.
Yaffe.
Yes.
Vote,
Yes.
Mellon.
Yes.
Time is 9:08. Okay, so. the Last thing that we have is,
Action on the minutes. Action on the minutes.
okay,
Her and I should not vote on this because we weren't there. Correct.
So the primary.
Minutes. We weren't in executive session on the second.
Correct. If they'll vote on no, okay, if the majority, if they're comfortable voting on, we got this from in open session. If you have, you can't vote, it's not recorded. though. You can abstain.
okay, where's the action item?
That packet you had in your hand.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
I'm like, I know it's here. Okay, so the executive session minutes, the recommended motion is that the Board of Education of Mundaline High School District 120 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the executive session minutes for September 7th, 2021.
So moved.
Seconded.
Rostrelli,
Yes.
Becky,
Abstain.
Abstain.
Wellington, abstain. Yaffe,
Yes.
Vote,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Ponce.
Yes.
Second.
Uh,
I did.
Laura?
Yeah.
Yep, me.
I asked her twice.
Okay, the next item is, I'm gonna keep this moving quickly, guys, because I know it's getting late and everybody's getting tired. President's prerogative, we have a distinction for Peter that Kevin has.
You,
Look at you, all fancy, Peter.
so in recognition for Peter going through the professional development opportunities and following on and listening to the other presentations that take place, you have bestowed the level 1 status of a master board member and a key member to contributing to being a school board that's reached recognition status. Your efforts are greatly appreciated.
Well done. Okay,
My wife gets her master's this weekend.
Oh,
Wow.
Hey,
I think this is gonna get pushed under the rug really.
okay, and then there's
Right,
two
go
other
through.
things we wanted to talk about, special activities bus and,
So I'll do that one first. A couple of things Laura asked me to do is, August, whenever it was, you as a board asked for us to look at having an activity bus
Mhm.
that would take students home later than 4:30. So we did put another one in the service at 6:30. So we've had currently 20 opportunities to be able to take students home, starting at the beginning of September through the end of September. So this is our month of September stats. Before I tell you the numbers, we did anticipate they would be lower because the weather is warmer. And you still have a number of students that can still walk home, still a number of students that are driving with friends. So through the month of September, we were able to transport 70 students. That could be the same students multiple times during the week. We averaged just over 2.5 students at a time. Typically, though, the range was from 2 up to 7 students on a bus at a time. So those students are getting the service that didn't have it before. We do or would like, or we shall continue with the after-school activity bus at 6:30. We want to at least get through the winter season and see if those numbers increase because of the sports being inside and the weather changing. But that's an update for you and that request that you had.
Is that a full-fledged bus from our transportation
Yes,
company versus the Mundaline bus driven by Mundalines?
yes, correct. We're not able to do that. We're not able to have a Mundline staff member drive a minibus.
Okay.
To take kids.
okay, and then the
What's-
other.
Hold on, sorry, I just want, what's the reason for that? Because I know that my mom was telling me some strange thing out west, I think, where the superintendent got her license to drive a bus because they were having a shortage. Because she led 7 of the administrative staff followed suit and they're all eligible to drive, but I don't know if they're doing it, but it's because of shortage. What's our reason why we can't?
It's Illinois state statute. So if I wouldn't have my CDL, I could certainly transport the students in a bus that was yellow, essentially, not our bus. We can't have our own staff transporting in our school vehicles, like our minibuses, only if it's for an athletic event where it's not repetitive academic activities. So once you start to where you're going and picking kids up every day to get them to and from school, that breaks that threshold. Believe me, we would do that.
Okay, and then the next item on president's prerogative, we've been virtual for our audience so that we've been zooming so that people can join the meeting. In order to get back to being more connected, we'd like to have, since we can't have people here and we're not having overwhelming attendance on the Zoom aspect of it, and we have additional staff that have to stay late, we thought maybe if we needed to go back to it, we always can, but we thought maybe we should suspend the virtual option for parents. If they want to come, they're welcome to come here. But that, Kevin, is there anything you want to add to it?
I would just remind, so in the Friday update, it provided the stats that we had. So we're averaging less than 3 people, and the bulk of that was passed in the spring when we were doing more of the work with remote learning or not. The example would be the last 2 meetings. This meeting, we've had 0 viewers, and in September, we had 2. So the viewership's really come down. Even going back and like looking at the recordings, We're averaging roughly 3 viewings through the recordings approximately. The average view time, so when somebody clicks on our link, it takes them to a YouTube. Anybody that goes on there, the average length they're viewing something is 2 minutes, 30 seconds.
Okay,
So they're not even viewing a full presentation on a topic.
okay.
So, and as
So-
long as we have the option to have them here, if they have questions, they want to make comments, they're welcome. We have room. I think that it's time to let that go for now. And
Does this capability that we have enable us, if we're quarantining, to participate in a way that won't, if we get rid of this, or can we still participate if we're quarantining?
It's a great question. So when people are reading their resolutions, that's one of the things I think that's in there, to be able to allow that to still happen. So once the governor's executive order expired, the option for board members to be able to zoom in was removed.
So right now, we couldn't?
You
anyway?
cannot zoom in
It's
right now.
expired?
Correct.
I personally think the option for families at home that can't make it in because they have kids and they can't leave their kids at home, but they can still sit at the computer and watch is nice. But when you share stats like that, it's kind of like, it's probably not worth it.
we have to keep extra staff here late. It's just if we had a healthy, robust attendance, I would say fine. But if we're having 2 or 3 people up for 2 minutes, I don't think it's worth.
Right.
And the fact that tonight you're bringing it up to discuss it, nobody logged in the entire meeting.
Right.
So, like I said, if circumstances change, we can always revisit.
Yeah, it's not like a formal thing we're voting on.
Okay.
Yeah, so, okay, I think you have your direction on that.
Okay.
The last thing does anybody have any questions they want to have answered? We're doing very well on our vaccination rates and minimal quarantining, so that's nice to see. For our district that we're,
The positivity rates are just
they're dropping.
0.93 to 1.7 positivity rates in the area right now. Those are absolutely great numbers.
And just to point out with that, schools everywhere, including here, are having their homecomings. And we're not seeing outbreaks in schools.
Right.
We have 1,200 kids at homecoming.
Wow, that's great.
So that's good news.
Yeah,
And they're still keeping the metrics on.
yeah, the graphic on the website is still up, and I think all of them but one are in the furthest to the green side, and the other one is between 50 and 200. It's the drop down that it's gone to, so the numbers are fascinating to watch. They're great.
We're looking good there. Yeah, so I would, I think Aaron mentioned it before. Maybe, just maybe, we could incorporate dinners before the meeting occasionally again. So that we can all see each other's faces just for a brief moment without a mask.
That'd be great.
It was standard procedure.
Yes, of course, following standard procedure, but that's.
No, I mean, it was. It
Yeah.
always had been across.
Yeah.
Yeah, so could
We voted
it.
it in.
Did you?
Sloppy joes and beans.
All right, there we go. Okay, and I know it's getting late,
Right.
so I think if there's no other questions, I think we should wrap up.
Yep.
Okay. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Wellington. Yes. Becky.
Yes.
Gaffney.
Yes.
Vote.
Yes.
Mellon.
Yes.
Ponce.
Yes.
Restrelli.
Yes.
Meeting is adjourned at 9:19.
There we go.